Meghan Markle may have thought she was finally changing the story, but if the latest wave of television mockery is any indication, the brand strategy designed to make her look polished, relatable, luxurious, and completely in control may be producing the exact opposite reaction, and that is where this gets uncomfortable. Because this time, the problem isn't a palace balcony, a family feud, or an old royal controversy being dragged back into the spotlight. The alleged new strategy is much simpler. Move away from the drama, lean harder into lifestyle, food, wellness, domestic glamour, and carefully curated celebrity appearances, and convince audiences that Meghan's next chapter is not about royalty at all. But what happens when television hosts look at that carefully packaged reinvention and decide the packaging itself is the joke? That is the controversy now hanging over the latest appearances. Because instead of audiences simply seeing a sophisticated lifestyle personality, critics and comedians keep seeing the same familiar character, the Duchess, trying to sell ordinary moments as extraordinary experiences. Meghan Markle spent years proving Hollywood should see her as serious, sophisticated, and powerful. But television, comedians, late-night hosts, cartoon writers, panel shows, and sketch programs seem to give her a different role, and that opening observation is what makes the whole situation so fascinating. Meghan can change the setting, change the clothes, change the products, change the language, change the camera angle, and change the entire presentation around her. But somehow, the jokes keep finding her. That's not the kind of publicity any celebrity wants. In fact, it may be one of the most frustrating forms of publicity imaginable, because a negative review can be answered, an accusation can be denied, and a bad headline can eventually disappear. A joke is different. A joke can survive without needing permission. And once audiences understand the punchline, every new appearance can become another opportunity to repeat it. That is the alleged brand problem in one sentence. Reinvention was supposed to create distance from the past. Instead, according to the criticism surrounding her public image, every reinvention appears to give the old jokes fresh material. The royal chapter produced jokes. Hollywood produced jokes. The lifestyle chapter produced jokes. Products produced jokes. Food television produced jokes. Even attempts to appear completely ordinary have become material, because the audience already knows the extraordinary backstory surrounding the woman presenting that ordinary moment. And once that happens, the smallest detail suddenly carries the weight of everything that came before it. Then came MasterChef Australia, and this is where the strategy becomes especially interesting. On paper, this should have been almost perfect. There was no formal palace environment demanding protocol, no tense family confrontation, no political speech, no courtroom, no aggressive interviewer waiting to challenge her. Instead, there was food, cooking, contestants, flowers, a beautifully arranged environment, and the kind of warm domestic atmosphere that fits perfectly with the lifestyle identity Meghan has been trying to cultivate. MasterChef Australia made that problem impossible to miss. This should have been one of Meghan's easiest appearances. No palace battle, family confrontation, courtroom drama, or aggressive interviewer. And yet, somehow, the conversation still became about Meghan herself. That's the part that television comedians love, because the contrast practically writes the joke for them. Imagine the calculation behind a polished lifestyle appearance, everything carefully positioned, every detail designed to look effortless, every ingredient placed where it belongs, every moment intended to communicate warmth and sophistication. But the more controlled the scene appears, the easier it becomes for critics to ask whether the spontaneity is actually spontaneous at all. Just food, contestants, soft lighting, and the lifestyle atmosphere she has built. Yet even there, the appearance turned into ridicule. A cooking moment led television personalities question the performance and laugh at the gap between glossy presentation and reality. That is exactly where the comedy becomes dangerous for a carefully managed celebrity image. A comedian doesn't need to prove anything. They don't need a 100-page investigation. They need one recognizable contradiction. Meghan wants to be relatable, but she is associated with luxury. She wants privacy, but her public life remains highly visible. She wants to distance herself from royal identity, yet the title and royal history remains central to public interest. She wants to establish herself as a lifestyle authority, but the products and presentation inevitably invite comparisons with ordinary things people already have at home. And that line cuts straight into the alleged strategy. The backdrop keeps changing. The punchline doesn't. That is the nightmare scenario for any celebrity trying to control a narrative. If people laugh at the same underlying idea regardless of whether you're standing inside a palace, a Hollywood event, a kitchen, or a product launch, then the issue is no longer the individual appearance. It becomes the public perception of the character you have created. And suddenly the kitchen isn't just a kitchen anymore. It's a stage. The food isn't simply food anymore. It becomes part of a carefully constructed identity. The packaging isn't merely packaging, it becomes part of the story. The products aren't simply products, they become symbols of taste. And that gives comedians something incredibly powerful, a tiny object carrying an enormous amount of celebrity baggage. The jam jokes are a perfect example. A jar of jam should be one of the least controversial things imaginable. Yet once it becomes attached to Meghan's luxury lifestyle branding, the conversation can shift from "does it taste good?" to "why is this being presented as such a major cultural event?" That is where parody thrives. A comedian can take something completely ordinary and exaggerate the surrounding mythology until the object itself becomes absurd. And that is where the story becomes even more uncomfortable, because the original pattern does not stop with one cooking appearance, one product, or one television joke. It keeps moving into every corner of the public image. Meghan Markle's earlier acting career was already used as comedy material, with Suits becoming shorthand for the gap between the image of a major Hollywood star and the reality of a relatively limited acting ensemble before Harry entered the story. Then, Harry became part of the same comedic universe, especially through sketches about his relationship with William, his royal status, his hair, and the increasingly complicated relationship between the brothers. What once looked like harmless royal teasing now carries a completely different weight because audiences know what happened afterward: the royal exit, the interviews, the memoir, the accusations, and years of public conflict. Old jokes suddenly feel like fragments of a story that became far more serious than the comedians could have imagined when those jokes were first written. And Meghan's family history added another layer. Her estrangement from her father, the stories surrounding her former husband, and repeated discussions about broken relationships created another recognizable pattern for comedians to revisit whenever a new controversy appeared. Comedy thrives on repetition, and once audiences believe they recognize a pattern, every new story can be connected to the previous one. Even completely unrelated subjects can suddenly be pulled into the same ecosystem. A medical appointment, a workout, a personal anecdote, a royal protocol joke, or a conversation about celebrity life can somehow circle back to Meghan because the name itself has become recognizable enough to carry the punchline. That is a difficult position for any celebrity because it means the person no longer controls the subject of the joke. The comedian does. Then came the sharper material from major comedians, where the royal complaints, Oprah-era narratives, security arguments, fame, privilege, and the couple's decision to leave royal life became recurring targets. The humor became less about Meghan as an actress entering a strange royal family and more about the contradiction critics believed they saw in the Sussex story, wanting freedom while remaining deeply connected to the institution they left, seeking privacy while repeatedly discussing private experiences publicly, and attempting to build independence while maintaining enormous commercial value from royal identity. Whether audiences agree with those criticisms is almost beside the point. Comedy only needs the contradiction to be recognizable. South Park pushed that contradiction into visual satire, while Family Guy targeted the money, Netflix association, celebrity lifestyle, and idea of becoming financially independent after leaving royal life. Spitting Image took the same material and exaggerated the titles, status, money, celebrity connections, and obsession with royal hierarchy. Suddenly, the Sussex brand was not merely something being discussed by journalists. It had become something entertainers could imitate. And imitation is often more revealing than direct criticism because it strips away the explanation and leaves only the most recognizable characteristics. That became particularly dangerous for Meghan's new lifestyle direction. The more carefully the persona is controlled, the more material satire has to work with. The title, the elegant presentation, the luxury products, the food rituals, the celebrity associations, the emphasis on nurturing and family, and the polished domestic aesthetic can all be exaggerated until the very things intended to communicate sophistication become the punchline. That is why the MasterChef appearance matters. It was supposed to demonstrate a softer, warmer, more relatable version of Meghan. Instead, critics found another opportunity to question whether the spontaneity was genuine. And then the celebrity world becomes part of the same conversation. Names such as Serena Williams, Beyoncé, Kris Jenner, and Jamie Kern-Lima appear around the broader discussion of Meghan's celebrity network and perceived distance from some famous connections. Again, the issue isn't whether every friendship has changed or whether every person mentioned has actually distanced themselves. The larger perception is what matters, Meghan's brand was heavily associated with celebrity proximity. And when that proximity becomes less visible, audiences notice the empty space. Hollywood does not have to publicly reject someone for the perception of distance to become part of the story. That is why the television jokes keep landing. They are not operating in isolation. Every new appearance arrives carrying years of context. A product carries the royal history. A kitchen appearance carries the Hollywood history. A privacy discussion carries the media history. A celebrity friendship carries the Sussex history. And a joke about Meghan inevitably brings Harry back into the frame. The two identities remain connected, even when the brand strategy attempts to separate them. So the alleged new strategy may actually be facing the oldest problem. Meghan can introduce a new version of herself, but comedians can always bring back the previous versions. That is why the mockery feels relentless. The story keeps changing, but the punchlines keep finding the same pressure points: fame, money, titles, privacy, family, status, luxury, and reinvention. And until the audience stops seeing those contradictions, every new chapter risks becoming another setup for the same joke. The harshest possibility is therefore not that television hosts dislike Meghan Markle. It is that they have discovered she is unusually easy to turn into shorthand. When a name alone can trigger recognition, the comedian has already won half the battle. Meghan doesn't need to be the subject of the entire segment. Her name can appear for seconds, the audience remembers the history, and the joke moves on. That is what makes the alleged brand backlash so difficult to outrun. The new strategy can change the packaging, but the audience still remembers what came before. And that leaves Meghan facing the ultimate reinvention problem. If every new image is judged through the old one, then the new brand never truly gets a clean beginning. The kitchen becomes royal. The product becomes celebrity culture. The celebrity culture becomes Hollywood. Hollywood becomes Harry. Harry becomes the royal family. And suddenly, after all the effort to create something completely new, the audience is right back where the story began, laughing at the same contradictions in a completely different setting.